Test, test, test. Test 1 2. Test 1 2.
We will begin in 1 minute if everybody wants to take their seats. Work session for the Williamson County Board of Education. First item on the agenda is the consent agenda. I'll make one note that Ms. Clements has requested that 4.403 library materials under board policies be removed from the consent agenda. So we will pull that out, and I don't know if Donna, if you want to make any comments about that, or you want to wait till Monday night as far as the request for the removal, since consent agenda is first, or do you want to just wait till later? We can, or we can. Can you do your mic? Yeah. And we can also wait till later if you want, if you're not ready. I just wanted, since it's on consent, I wanted to pull it off and then highlight that we were removing it.
It might be in the best interest of time,
Yeah.
because I have all my notes in here, because I thought it would be
We'll just take it
closer
up
to-
at on the policy section later.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's where I put it.
So
Thanks.
let's move that down to, let's see, where's the second reading?
Back page, sorry. C.
Okay, board policies for, under C, we'll take it up there. Okay. All right, any other questions about the consent agenda? Okay. We will move on to superintendent's report. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Board, for your work and the time you're putting into this. We have 45 minutes on my agenda. I do want to start with an update on our open zoning. You guys may recall that a few months ago you approved particular schools for open zoning. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 42 of our schools, 42 of our 50 schools that are subject to open zoning. Of course, Renaissance and Vanguard Virtual were not. And yesterday was the lottery day for Allison Nunley and her staff to go through the process of plugging in those applications and structuring the lottery as required by state law. The day before was the deadline. So April 15th was everyone's deadline. Our staff went through the lottery process. I want to give you some numbers. This year we had 1,690 out-of-zone applications. Last year we had 1,205. So it's up by about 400 applications. Now, a lot of those are duplicates as families actually make a request for multiple schools because they recognize that there are some limits at some of those schools, and they wanted to have potentially have a choice related to that. Currently, we have about 2,600 students attending WCS who are not in their zone school. So that's about 6% of our total. And again, about 1,600 made requests. Again, some of those are duplicates. So what we have seen is a slight increase over the years in the percentages, but it also emphasizes to me that choice we give, still the vast majority of our families choose to attend the school where they're zoned, where their community is. But I will tell you, I'm pleased that we're making sure that we maximize that opportunity as much as we possibly can. This year, we have currently 5 schools, once Ms. Nunley's staff went through the process of identifying more applications than available seats. In other words, for practical purposes, 5 schools had the potential to have a wait list. That included Creekside Elementary. That happened to be 2 more than the number. So chances are somebody in that line is going to say, you know what, I decided on something else. But in any event, as of yesterday, when we structured this lottery, we have 2 students who are on the waiting list for Creekside. Spring Station Middle, 9 students on a waiting list. And then the remaining are high schools. Franklin High School, 48 on the waiting list. Independence, 30. And Ravenwood High School, 56 on the waiting list. Again, that was as of yesterday. So far, up through last year, we have not had a student through this state lottery system who has not gotten the school that they asked for, because somebody rolls off ahead of them and we've been able to fill it. There's still a real possibility here that it could happen because of the numbers that, the 48 and 56, especially at those two schools. But I wanted to make sure you are aware of that. We're following that structure. Ms. Nunley's office is in the process of letting everyone know. If I'm not mistaken, Brian, she actually sent those email messages out today.
They actually went out as soon as the lottery
They went
was
out
processed.
yesterday. It was automated.
It's automated.
Thank you. It actually went out yesterday.
Yes, sir.
So some of those families have already made the decision. 10 days from now, April 27th, Monday, is the deadline for families to choose that. So I just wanted you guys to be aware of that in case you hear something. That's a nutshell of that. If you guys have any questions about that process or that open zoning, certainly open any questions you may have. I just thought it was important for you to hear that.
And I will say,
logistical
Mr.
process.
Golden, I talked to Allison right before I came over. About a third have already accepted a slot
Okay.
as of today
All right.
of the out-of-zone request.
Second, I want to mention that we do have on our agenda the AP Psychology textbook adoption. We do have a presentation. I'm not going to give you the presentation during the superintendent's report because it is a separate item. Just want to make sure you guys are aware of that. You will, in just a few minutes, have hear from Ashley Flood, who is our social studies specialist for our secondary schools, who will give you some detail related to that AP Psychology textbook. Next, I wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up and a preview related to my goals the annual goals that you all set for me in November. I will be giving you a detailed presentation of those goals in May. And just as a reminder, to give you a couple of nutshells, we talked about making sure that we had a plan to improve how we address bullying and harassment in the following year. We've had a committee working on that. We will bring you that in May. Likewise, competitive compensation. A couple of months ago, when you all approved the budget, we gave you a preview of that to get feedback. We will be making a few changes based on the feedback you gave us, and again, we will give you that pay proposal in May with that detail. Related to that, tonight, Rachel's going to give you a short update on budget with county government. And the short version, Rachel, is there's not a lot of change yet. We've had one meeting, but she'll share some details related to that. We will have a few more meetings before the May board meeting, so we can get a better grasp of where the county commission is with budget. And I may give you some detail related to that. Finally, the third goal that we'll be reporting on in May is to identify opportunities to access alternate funding sources. I want to give you just a little bit of where we are and where we're headed related to that. I'll be giving you some details about actual donations we've received from various sources. Of course, from our boosters who do an incredible job for us, to some commitments we have for our innovation hub, and I've touched on a little bit of that already. Also, I want to let you know that the foundation, the Education Foundation, which has been dormant since 2022, has been reactivated, and our intent and plan is for that to be the mechanism by which we get proactive about seeking corporate donations. Related to that, I'm going to be working on putting together not just a committee, but a group of parents who are involved in both our arts and athletics programs to work towards finding ways to tap our community, corporate donations and individual donations for some of those projects that we just can't get funded through tax money. And this is more than just the traditional donations we get from our boosters. Because largely, as many of us have had discussions, the bulk of our booster receipts are from boosters. They do fundraisers, but largely it's the same folks. And so we are looking to have some folks who really know our community, really know our corporate structure, to brainstorm over that. Finally, I want to mention we are in the early stages of speaking with a local college about piloting a full tuition scholarship for teacher candidates who are in our Teaching as a Profession program to go to college tuition free and come back to us when they finish college. We've seen a model elsewhere, and we're working on that. I can't share any details yet because we're still in that planning stage, but we're very excited about that possibility. And that's one of those things that, based on what I've seen, it takes little baby steps early. You might get a couple early, and then it grows as people get committed. And one thing that I've seen so often in my professional life is folks who have the capacity to help will help if something hits their heart. And so that's something that we're hoping specifically to address with what we're working on. Mr. Chair, that's just kind of a nutshell of what we're going to give you next month. There's going to be more detail next month, but I didn't want that to fall off your radar and you'd be surprised when we present you with my report on my goals. If you have any questions about that, certainly open to any questions that you have. A couple of things I just want to mention just about operationally where we are. TCAP is going on right now, and as you all know, tomorrow we're actually off. Tomorrow is Good Friday. It's officially on our calendar as a spring holiday, and it's funny. I just got to tell one silly story. I tell these stories to our team sometimes. Kevin Deck, our testing coordinator, keeps us informed of every detail about what's going on because inevitably there's some issue from the state or, some of the tests are on paper and some of them are computerized and all that kind of stuff. And my phone rang yesterday afternoon and Kevin Deck's name popped up. And I answered, oh boy, something happened with a test. And it was Dave Allen sitting at Kevin's desk. So he said, no, I was just working on something else. And so things are going great. Things are going great with testing. And I want to give you a comment and a reminder about some discussions that you all had the last few months. Our teachers teach the standards and they're excellent at it. They don't teach to the test, but the state measures how well our students have mastered the standards with these tests. And so I think it's just important to emphasize that when these tests come in Williamson County schools, it's not a panic in those classrooms because they've been preparing and helping those students master standards and spiraling back when it's apparent that a student hasn't to work their way up to it. Another sub-issue related to that, Mr. Chair, you and I actually had this conversation maybe 2 or 3 months ago about our calendar. In addition to TCAP and the end of course test that are the state test, this is the window of time for AP exams as well. And the AP offices give us specific dates for each particular test. And usually it's maybe the last few days in April to maybe 10 days or so into May, Dr. Webb, something like that. It's usually in that range that they take those specific tests. So we will be testing students through probably about the second week in May, depending on what course they're taking. In the context of what you and I talked about was, we talked about after the last presidential election that we did not want to have school during an election. Well, in 2026, there are AP exams that are scheduled that very day by the AP folks. And so it's actually scheduled as a school day for us right now. You will actually get a hint of that when we give you a presentation related to AP psychology, because last year we actually had an inclement day. If I'm not mistaken, it was flooding or storms, the day that we actually were scheduled to take the AP psychology exam. And so those things can still impact us. And then we are given an alternate makeup day for students who are sick, et cetera. So AP psychology last year, we happened to have had to use the alternate makeup day. So students were prepared, and then Mother Nature interfered, and then they had to re-prepare. And of course, as you guys know, those kinds of things can throw some people off and have an impact on us. Also, a couple of things for you, especially as board members. A couple of really great events are happening in the next 2 weeks. I know Lydia Glenn has mentioned these to you. We are celebrating our volunteers through our Shining Apple Awards this coming Tuesday. It's at 5:15. Actually, you have it on my calendar, Lydia, at 5:15. Sometimes she puts my calendar a little bit ahead of the actual start time. 5:30. Oh, it's.
Reception is 5:15.
Thank you.
Program is 6.
Okay, thank you. So Carol Birdsong's department puts this together. They've done a great job over the years. So we will be celebrating representatives from every school who've done something great for our schools, the volunteers. 5:15 reception, as Carol mentioned. At Independence High School, we're going to do that in the auditorium with a reception in the atrium just outside of that. It's a great opportunity for you guys to thank those volunteers. It's a really great time. The next week, if I'm not mistaken, Tuesday, May 1st. Thank you. Thursday, May 1st, we are thanking our students and their parents for those students who have committed to the U.S. military. We're having a ceremony for that. That is at 5 o'clock at Legacy Middle School's auditorium. And I got to tell you, sometimes we have military retirees come in their uniforms. It's a proud time and a scary time for some of those parents as we thank those. So that's a very big day. There are a lot of other celebrations going on at schools, but those two are close to my heart, and I just want to again invite you. What we typically do with the Shining Apple is take some photos with you all as we take turns telling little video stories that Carol's department puts together. It's an incredible day, and then again with the recruiters for each of the branches, they're usually represented thanking those students who make commitments. Pretty impressive group of young people. And Dr. Driggers actually asked me this week what percentage of our students commit to the U.S. military. Last year, we had 36 students notify us that they were committing to the U.S. military. That's a little bit more than 1% of our graduating class. I did a quick internet research, and it's hard for me to know how much of the data is accurate. But what I found is about 0.5% of high school graduates enlist in the U.S. military. If that's accurate, our students are committing at twice the national average. That's accurate? Thank you. So I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of our community and the values that our teachers and our parents are instilling in our students. I will say, generally speaking, the South tends to have a higher percentage commit than other regions of the country for whatever reason. You're nodding with that too. I don't know if you'd seen that data. Army.
It's not good.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we also get, we get such a higher percentage of service academies.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, Mr. Welch mentioned we get a higher percentage of service academies. And we have actually had representatives from our senator's offices, U.S. senator's offices, come to these meetings from time to time when we have a commitment to the military. So with that, Mr. Chair, that's my report, knowing that we do have another presentation related to AP psychology in just a bit.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for any of Mr. Golden's report? Mr. Galbraith?
Jason, one thing on do we know what happened on the practice ACT test? I don't know if it was across the board, but I know, the computers were down, so I think they had to take it by on paper.
Thank you for that. I don't know the answer to that question. Dr. Allen, Dr. Webb, can you speak to that?
I don't have any information to share on that. That may have been isolated, but we can get some follow-up on that to send out.
That's what I was wondering, if it was isolated or if it wasn't.
Yeah, I had not heard that.
And so first of all, thank you on the athletics piece. I know we had talked about engaging the boosters. I've been advocating that for a while, so I really appreciate hearing what you put together. And I guess I'd encourage you, after talking with a couple of boosters, is to make sure that is a forum where they can engage one another as well as the district and have bi-directional communication, and not just pushing things down at them or even asking them questions. Like make sure that the agenda and the forum is open to actually solicit their feedback on what's important to them, not what you want to ask them for. And so included in that, I think we missed a big opportunity to engage them on this apparel contract. And the more I find out about it, the more frustrated I am. But it was signed in early February. It was actually executed in the middle of March, as far as technically executed by both parties, including one of our final signatures. And so, but then we got the feedback from the community after they found out about it, a month later. But then subsequent to all of that feedback, we signed an addendum, and I just got it today, and I want you to talk about the information that's being pushed out, because I was getting information from our school that was being driven by the new contract, but there still hasn't been anything distributed to this effect, and it's causing quite a big difference in operating our SOPs, if you will, and the requirements on our schools and the discretion on our schools and the requirements on our parents to purchase things out of their own pocket that are being driven by the contract now that weren't prior to the addendum. And so I've asked Rachel to get some information that she's already started giving me in the last 20 minutes. But I'm going to do a dive into how our schools all operate from these athletic funds that are funded with non-taxpayer dollars, and I suspect they're done quite a bit differently. There's quite a bit of discretion amongst the schools, but I'm gonna look into it and get back with maybe some recommendations on how we might go forward. But my biggest concern is that there's all these funds, so all the booster clubs have board representation, and boards develop budgets and dictate spending, but all the money that comes into the athletic fund is collected and distributed solely at the discretion of the principal and the AD, maybe at the principal and maybe delegated to the AD. But I think we need some parent oversight there. Maybe not taking away the authority, but just some transparency and decision making on how those funds are spent. But that's one of the things I know I'm going to look at, but I don't know what I'm going to find. So just letting you know that I'm looking at that.
Well, thank you for that. I will say first, we can always grow in communication. Our model is for our coaches and ADs who have that relationship with the parents to communicate, and so we've had some discussions just in the last few days about that. So that's a threshold that we can always grow. My hope is that when we introduce these structured, planned conversations, we'll be able to do a better job with that. We have had some discussions over the years about, how do we send messages out to so many people all at once so that everybody gets and can have those discussions? And I think we have room to grow related to that. Second, you mentioned the contract itself and the way it's funded, and you're right that it's a substantial expense, and largely it's funded by the boosters. And so I did want Dr. Webb to speak to our process and how we're doing things related to that. And then Rachel may as well on the finance end from, you know, if you would, Dr. Webb, share a little bit operationally how we walk through that. And then Rachel, I know, for example, we do have audits, outside audits of site-based funds where, and I want to just do a double check on how those are reviewed by our auditors. Dr. Webb?
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. Mr. Galbraith and I had the opportunity to speak a little bit in regards to this, and so thank you for summarizing some of those pieces as we kind of start this conversation off. One of the things that we can do is that we can take the very first apparel contract, the second one, and this third one, and we can articulate the differences between them. This is our third apparel contract that we've had, and they're long contracts. So we can help identify for the board those major differences. There aren't substantial changes from last year to this year. When the award was given to Matthews Team Sports, the process of reviewing the bids surfaced a lot of feedback from our schools. We asked all of our high school representatives to share information on behalf of their coaches, their athletic departments, their booster clubs, their students, and we heard a lot of feedback. In the review process of those two contracts, when the award was being decided, you know, that isn't the point that we can go to each of those individual people and negotiate, as an example, of issues that we've had with our last contract or things that we want to see different. After the award was given, that's when we can go back and say to the person, the Matthews Team Sports, who was awarded the contract, to say, here are some pieces, now that you've been given the award, some pieces that we would like to see done differently. Let's negotiate. Let's take this feedback that we've received from our school communities, and we've received a lot of it, actually, an overwhelming amount of information, to see what kind of aspects that we could do differently in this contract, even though the bones of the contract are similar to what we've had. A lot of pieces are the same that we've had in the past. How can we ensure that it better meets our needs than in prior years? So through that process, we asked our schools to reflect upon the feedback they'd already given us for the review. And we scheduled a meeting with each athletic administration, the principal, the assistant principal, and the athletic director on behalf of their school athletic community. And Mr. Joins, who's here this evening, who's our district athletic director sitting in the back, he, myself, or Ms. Dickerson, who's our executive director of high schools, the three of us went and had a meeting with each high school group. The first half of that meeting was reviewing the feedback that we had received and changes and aspects that they would like to see done differently. We had heard so much of those pieces. We'd actually had a conversation with Mr. Joins being the lead voice with Matthews Team Sports to share some of those pieces we'd like to see done differently. But we wanted to go ahead and ask our schools, what else is it? You know, what else is missing? What else are you feeling? Are you hearing? What are your students telling you? The main things that we heard, one of the main things, as I'll give you one example, that we heard from the schools is that students like to choose their own shoes. You know, in our prior contracts, it's been written in, and at the beginning of the contract, you know, schools were pretty diligent and enforced that contract really well, and it got loose towards the end. And what they wanted to see happen with a new contract is that students, even if this award is an Adidas contract, as it has been in the prior contract years, they wanted to choose their own shoes. So we negotiated with Matthews Team Sports, and that was one of the pieces that came up in an addendum. So the first half of those meetings at each of the high schools that we completed was just our team and the schools having honest conversations about what their schools felt. At then the end of the meeting, we brought in Tate Matthews, who is the owner and operator of Matthews Team Sports, and we let him address those issues that particular school had, hear their concerns, hear the pieces that they'd like to see done differently, and we repeated that process at every single one of our high schools that has athletic competitive teams. Some of those meetings were an hour and a half, some of them were over 3 hours. But we took the time just to hear what their school communities, what they had to say. And in those conversations, like I said, there was a lot of feedback from what students felt, what parents felt, what small sports coaches felt, what female sports coaches felt. There was a lot of specific information. When those concluded, Mr. Joins, representing our group, compiled all that feedback, met with Tate Matthews with Matthews Team Sports, and then with Rachel Farmer's department, Kirk Elliott, who oversees our contracts, and shared all those aspects that we'd like to see done differently, and addendums that we had gotten Matthews Team Sports to agree upon. So that has happened in the last 3 weeks, I guess. Last 3 weeks, we've kind of wrapped those processes up. Mr. Elliott helped draft an addendum to the contract. Again, one of the main pieces that you'll see, instead of, as in the prior 2 contracts, where the expectation when you're competing in an athletic contest, as an example, that your apparel is Adidas, that the exception is your shoes. The school can make a choice. The teams can choose their own shoes if they would like. They don't have to be Adidas. Another issue would be if let's just say I have some type of gloves, like I'm playing football and I have a certain type of glove that fits my hand better. One of the addendums is that you can't have a logo of another competitive competitor to Adidas shown on your gloves. So you would have to be covered in order for you to wear them. It couldn't be showing the Adidas logo, or a non-Adidas logo, as an example. So those pieces were negotiated, put into the contract. There is promotional dollars that each school gets as a part of the contract. And so if the school chose not to do the full contract, not to do the full shoes part of the contract, their promotional dollars were slightly decreased. And that was part of the addendum. In addition, part of our conversations were in regards to service. We heard a lot of booster communication, a lot of school-based sports teams feedback, specifically smaller sports, that felt like that the service needed to improve, and that they worried that because maybe their team wasn't spending as much money, maybe they didn't get as good service as a larger sports team. So a part of what was created was an order calendar. So if I'm a spring sport and it's set by TWSAA the first day of practice, so we backwards mapped what is the due date. If you want to have things by the first day of practice, what is the date that you need to have your order submitted by? And we did that for every sport, so that the calendar is established, it's agreed upon by Matthews Team Sports. If an order is placed by that deadline, you will get your materials that you need, your apparel that you need for practice and games, you will get it by the first day of practice. If for some reason you don't get that, then Matthews Team Sports has agreed to a discount for that, for those items, whatever those items happen to be that you don't get. So there are pieces like that we felt like were important based on the feedback that we heard, that it was important to go back and negotiate with Matthews Team Sports to add some pieces that really met the needs of our schools. As we had those meetings, and Mr. Joins was at every single one of them, I was at some, Ms. Dickerson was at all but one, I think. It was well received, it was robust conversation, a lot of appreciation for the time spent, the explanation. What we recognized in the implementation of this contract is that when prior contracts were rolled out, we should have done a better job and could have done a better job in communicating with everyone, communicating with our school communities, communicating with boosters, and communication is an evolving goal of ours to continue to improve communication. So we heard that feedback, and we're going to continue to work to improve. In working with Kirk Elliott, who does these contracts and has done them for maybe over close to 30 years at this point, he shared with us, that's a pretty common thing, that when you have a contract that, in our district especially, if something's not going right and you've agreed to a contract, you go back, negotiate, and you do an addendum. So it felt good to meet some of those needs, and who knows, we may end up with another addendum at some point in the length of this contract. And we're certainly open to continue to grow in the process. Rachel?
Yeah, I'll just echo that a little bit, that Mr. Elliott does, he's been our purchasing director for 28 years and really has done hundreds of contracts. The idea of the addendum is anytime it's going to be that it in no way has a harmful repercussion on us. Most of the time, and again, in like this situation, we have listened to the feedback and thought these were ways that we could help. We could help with the vendor, we could help with the communities, again, with like the shoes. And so it's a business, the contracts are valid contract. The vendor does not have to agree to the addendum because they have the signed contract. So by agreeing to that, that you do not have to fully wear our shoes. That is a concession they make, and so that's why pretty standard procedure that when you make a concession like that, that there could be a deduction from what was promised on their side, again, as far as that promo money, because there has to be, with a concession that comes with a cost. And so if you have questions about that, we're totally happy to answer anything.
And Rachel, if you would, speak to the each individual school's use of the funds that they receive.
So we have activity funds, which are all the funds that are at the schools, and state accounting manual for schools says you have a choice of how you treat your athletics as far as reporting the financials. You can either have a general athletic account, which would mean fees and gate money all go into a general athletic account, and then that general athletic helps support all of your sports, or you can have each sport be self-contained. As far as I know, we've always made the decision, I mean, it was made way before I ever got here 15 years ago, that we operate under the general athletic model. So what that means is any gate money, again, fees at the end of the year, anything left over rolls into a general one, think of it as a savings account too, for athletics. And then they start the next year by taking the funds that are in general athletics. Normally, you will have coaches make requests for items that they need. And the athletic director and a athletic either principal, assistant principal, someone in the school, they meet and they budget out those funds. What does that mean? Tennis generally isn't going to have a gate. Golf isn't generally going to have a gate, but yet we have these sports that we want to support. Football is going to have a major gate. And so that's why the gate money goes in, and it helps distribute funding to make sure that all of the sports get the items that they need. Again, it varies a little bit from school to school in that if you looked at someone's books today, one school may have the main account, everything flowing through it, that general athletic account. Some will break it down and monitor during the year by sport, but at the end of the year, anything left over is going to roll up. Fundraising is different each sport because anytime you fundraise, it's restricted for what you fundraise it for. So those accounts stay. So if soccer had a fundraiser, that account will stay with whatever balance and it rolls to the next year. But again, anything that's left in a general athletic account at the end of the year, any balances left, roll up into that general athletic fund. Beginning of year, when the fees are charged and as gates occur, all of that revenue is going into that general athletic fund. And so at any time a parent, this happens, has happened from time to time, will come to a coach and say, hey, we would like to know. Most of the time the coaches can immediately provide to you. This is a breakdown of the money that's come in for us and how we've spent it. You can do that through the public records request, but coaches, generally speaking, are more than willing to, I mean, they'll provide that information for you. And so as far as being the feedback from the community, you have that opportunity. I mean, parents have the opportunity to talk with their coaches. I will tell you what comes in at the school level through the fees and through the gate money is not going to, obviously, it doesn't cover everything that the sports need, and that's why those booster clubs are so essential, because they come in and pick up the rest of the cost for those items.
And if I may, Mr. Galbraith, you're right that it does, a lot of those items do vary from school to school. For example, at most of our schools, the booster clubs, or maybe sometimes it's the band boosters, sometimes it's the PTO, sometimes it's the athletic boosters, run concessions. But that's not true at every school. And then if you know, for those funds that are booster funds, generally speaking, the principal or an assistant principal has conversations with those leaders about what their priorities are, even before some of the fundraisers occur, and the boosters put that effort in. we could not exist at the level we exist, anywhere near the level we exist without our boosters. And so, to your point, the better and more we communicate with our booster leaders, the better off we're all going to be, and the better services our students are going to get. That's part of what I think you were alluding to, there's some value in us having some discussions about that. Sometimes best practices in may be shared. I will tell you, just we have had some conversations over the years with our PTO leaders. We've had a group that has kind of been a touchstone for questions from PTO presidents. What we have found sometimes is they're really excellent at helping each other with practices and best practices, but they're sometimes very protective about their fundraisers, right? Because they found value in what they're doing, and there is competition. And some of those sources for fundraisers have made a commitment to a particular school because their business is right next door, and they want to make sure they protect that revenue source. So we want to be thoughtful about all those nuances and be respectful to our boosters when we talk with them. But in all those contexts, we have room to grow, and I agree with you on that.
So I guess to follow up with Dr. Webb, I mean, so y'all met these, hour and a half to 3 hour meetings with the school leadership, but and so I suspect that principal, assistant principal, ADs were there, maybe some coaches. Any booster representation when you met with any of those schools?
These meetings were the athletic administration. So the athletic director spoke on behalf of the coaches spoke to the athletic director on behalf of their boosters. We had a lot of feedback that was collected prior to these meetings, and we saw themes that emerged from the feedback from all the schools. There was parent feedback and student feedback reported through those various channels. So there weren't, parents representing each one of those booster groups, but the athletic director representing all those voices, in my opinion, did a very good job, and in addition to the athletic assistant principals speaking on behalf of their school communities of what their issues have been. And again, they were thematic.
So what I see as the biggest changes this year in this new contract is, unless my experience is different than anybody else's, but this is the first time that the shoes are being required. It's the first time that whether it's required or not, there was never a penalty for non-compliance, and so I get maybe that Matthews came forward and said, we're gonna enforce this year, even though there was no penalty for defined in the contract that I could see that was defined. And so now we also have to, so I'll take that one first. So now the decision on whether to purchase the shoes or not is by school and by team. And it's not all teams, it's just a select number of teams that are in this program. But the decision is being made by the school, and possibly by the school and the coach, but not by the people who are buying the shoes. And so here's the flow of the money. The parents buy the shoes. The sponsorship dollars go to the school. The school uses that to purchase free coaches gear. It could be used to purchase student gear, but part of it is allocated to administration. The bulk of it is allocated to coaches. And so you've got the ADs and the principals deciding whether or not they're going to get less money or not before they ask the parents whether they want to spend that money in the manner that's dictated by the contract. And so I just encourage you, I think, and I'm getting this feedback now because I've already purchased my Adidas shoes for next year because and we haven't even gotten, this is the ink's not dry, but yet everything is going through because based on the timeline, we've got to purchase everything by April and May. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this is the feedback that we got after our meeting. and this was just at Ravenwood, and I've heard from a couple other schools, but this head to toe where you can't wear another logo on your socks and you've got to have you've got to have Adidas gloves. That's all new. So it's new to be enforced. Maybe they're choosing to enforce all this stuff. There's never been a penalty, and there's never been a requirement to be head to toe. And so these are, I don't know what the penalty is for that. It's not clear. But it's being told to the parents that they have to have these things, or they've got to tape it up over. Like, we're not getting paid by Adidas. Adidas, through Matthews Team Sports, gives us some of our money back, but nobody has an NIL deal to get paid by Adidas, and we're treating it like that. And I think the fact that trying to dictate and make parents buy things to fit a brand, with the intent and the letter of the law to say you can't go out on the field in a game with something out there, or you've either got to tape it up or you're not going to be able to play, I think it's very wrong. And I think the more this gets out, the parents are, begrudgingly, they will do it because they want their kids to be able to participate. But it's reckless on behalf of us to expect and demand our parents to keep on shelling out this money, and I think it's wrong.
Thank you for that. I do want to speak to it a little bit with this caveat that we will dig in deep. The requirement that you addressed has been the requirement of the previous contracts, and you may remember Dr. Webb spoke to that was complied with better in earlier years, and then it changed. And I'm paraphrasing what she said. So that requirement has been there. It's important to us that we don't intentionally violate our contractual obligations. And what we found was when things are going fine, over time, the compliance wasn't as good as it should have been. So we set up a structure where all but those 6 sports that you're mentioning had no obligation ever again. It was removed from the contract. For those 6 sports, if a student did not wear those Adidas, then there would be no impact on the parents. The parents could choose with that small reduction in the promotional items that you spoke to. And you spoke to coaches' apparel, et cetera. To your earlier point, I believe that it varies from school to school, just like we talked about. But the bids and the proposals from the vendors who made proposals anticipated that as a commitment. And so what we've been able to do is remove that as a commitment so that if there is a problem down the road, we don't have that obligation. That's the key to it from my perspective. It was identified as something that had become a problem, and for relatively small dollars, we were able to negotiate that total removal. And Dr. Webb mentioned those other sports. They don't have that obligation anymore. Parents are totally free to purchase what they want for their students. Now, I get your point that there were some examples in the past, and you're right about that. So for what it's worth, and I think that's worth a lot, that was what we did in that particular example because we heard from parents. And what I also suspect, I don't know this, I suspect just over time the culture on that has changed from the last time we signed the contract with a commitment. So, but yeah, all your points and concerns are well made. I think it's definitely worth a review. We've had a good relationship with our contractor. What we have found is over the years, and like Dr. Webb mentioned, this is our 3rd iteration of this contract. It's been very much a net good for savings, for costs because of the volume of purchases. And it's been so many years now that it's hard to go back and compare to what each individual school was paying for. But those examples of coaches' apparel definitely are things we need to look at.
So are you saying that for all the vendors considered, this would have been an expectation for those sports?
Yeah, Dr. Webb, I know you were on the team that evaluated the contracts.
That's correct. We had 2 bids for our contract, and both bids included, to use Mr. Galbraith's term, head-to-toe implications of apparel on game day.
Okay, thank you.
Can you remind us of the duration of that contract?
6 years.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on that, or any other?
Final
Okay.
comment I'd like to make, Mr. Chair, is Dr. Webb mentioned the possibility of other changes. We're going to continue to explore that because I have a suspicion things are going to continue to change over time. You mentioned NIL. We don't have NIL. Students could outside of us. That's actually TSSAA rules. But as volatile as athletics is right now, I'd be surprised if we didn't have some changes in the next couple of years.
Speaking of athletics, can you go back to the open zoning and speak to what that looks like for high schoolers in open zoning if they are athletes?
Sure, thank you for that. With us approving open zoning, that does not eliminate the TSSAA rules related to students transferring schools. Right now, those I'm gonna use the word complex, and I'm looking over at Darren Joins. What we like to do with our students who are thinking about transferring is make sure that they give that detail to TSSAA because TSSAA is a decision maker on eligibility. So, for example, a school might have an open zone, but TSSAA might have a rule that restricts them from changing schools during their high school career. There may be some rules related to that. There could be some hardships related to that. It's not cut and dry that if you change based on WCS allowing it, that you might not have to sit out a year. There's some details related to TSSAA rules. On the other side of the coin, there's currently some legislation pending that would, in essence, allow for a one-time transfer, and I'm using my phraseology, without explanation, without a hardship. We don't know where that's going to land. So even as we sit today, the rules as we think they may exist could be different by the fall based on what the TSSAA has and the legislature are dealing with. Short version is a student should not rely on our transfer to be 100% confident they can immediately transfer and play at the next school. They need to check on that.
Anything further?
No, sir.
All right. We can move on to the operations report. Mr. King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A few construction updates. Brentwood Middle School Phase 2. The brick facade is complete. The framing inspection passed, and so the drywall installation has begun. All the window frame installation is complete, and painting has begun. So that project is moving along well. The transportation building Phase 2, we've talked about the office space for all of the transportation team has been completed. They've all been moved in. Phase 2 is to redo some of the parts bay and some of that area of the bus garage. So the demolition of the old office building is complete. The mezzanine has been installed, and the rough end for the framing for the new offices in the bus garage has started. The Innovation Center, the footing installation is about 50% complete. Some foundation block is being installed. The slab will be in 2 pours, and the first pour is scheduled for the last week of April. And I do have one more. I'm going to try to channel my inner Carol Bird song, and would like to give a shout out to Connor Shepard. He participated along with 4 other of our bus drivers in the first annual Tennessee School Bus Safety and Skills Region Competition and won first first place in his division. So he will now move on to the state competition in Pigeon Forge, and I believe that's in June, so we wish him the best of luck. But that was exciting.
So if he wins state, Carol will
Then Carol
announce
can
it.
do it. But I said I was going to do it. I was going to get my shout out tonight, even if Carol couldn't do it on Monday. Hopefully Carol will get to do it as well.
I can't
Yeah,
resist the
exactly.
joke. Did he back up without hitting a mailbox?
Apparently so.
I don't know if
Apparently
that's
so.
one of the tests, but I will
Yes.
say, in all serious related, well, I'm smiling. We do really work hard to minimize those opportunities to go in reverse. I mean, it's just the
Yes.
truth. And I know Allison Nunley and her mapping team will work with transportation to minimize those,
To do any-
those times.
yeah, that's correct.
And occasionally we'll see an example of somebody's, backing up. We'll say, you know what, let's add a quarter mile, and have a loop.
And that's my report unless anybody has any questions.
So if he wins, does he get a brand-new bus, maybe?
That's a great question. Surely
All-
it'll be
all in
more than
favor?
that plaque.
Yeah.
Yeah, something.
All right, any questions for Mr. King? All right, we'll move on to the board chair report. I'm going to talk about something that we spent a fair amount of time talking about, and I think this is a good development that hopefully everybody will be excited about. So we've talked a number of times about the technology committee and the desire that we have to dig further into that and explore options as a board and as a district on what to do about screen time and the use of technology and so forth. And I think there's general agreement broad agreement that we need to address it, that it's worth spending a significant amount of time and energy talking about and getting input across a cross-section of our community about. So Jason and I have talked about this, and my suggestion to him was that in this committee that we form, that we allow the opportunity for board members to appoint, each of us to appoint a parent to that committee. So each of the 12 of us on the board would have an opportunity to appoint one person of our choosing to have parent representation on the committee, and then the other members of the committee would be appointed by Jason and his team from among teachers, principals, central office, whoever they see fit. So I wanted to put that out there. We've decided that we want to go that direction, and we've agreed on that. We've also, primarily Jason and his team, have really worked hard on developing an outline and a scope of work for what this committee would do. And I'm going to read the 4 objectives that we've got on paper now. This is subject to some edits still, but I wanted to read these to you, and then we're going to email out the full document that consists of a timeline and some objectives for what this committee would seek to accomplish. So 4 objectives. Number 1, develop district-wide guidelines for the appropriate use of instructional technology during school hours. Number 2, establish recommendations for the optimal amount of screen time for students, categorized by grade level. Number 3, provide families with guidance on technology use and screen time limits based on the child's grade or age outside of school hours. Then 4, review current practices regarding personal device usage in schools to ensure they align with established screen time guidelines. So it's really seeking to deal with both the use of our computers, Chromebooks in the classroom during school hours, and also personal cell phones, and whether the appropriateness of them being brought into the schools, into the classrooms, and the students having access to those. So the vision here is that this would be up to a year. The committee would meet for up to a year on a regular basis to talk about different objectives, there'd be different session topics that are all laid out in this document. So I really appreciate you, Jason, and your team for putting this together. We've, as I said, for several months, this has been talked about, and some of us are pretty passionate about getting to a solution on this and having the community be engaged on this. So look for that in your email, and we'll try to implement this. I think the intent is for the first meeting of the committee to be in May. Is that right?
That is correct.
So we want to get on this pretty quickly and start to take up some of these issues over the next 90 days or so prior to school starting in the fall. So any feedback or questions or comments? I mean, certainly when the email goes out, you know, we're free to have a discussion about that on email and ask any questions, get clarification.
Mr. Chair, if I may, a couple of things. You had mentioned, we had talked about this maybe 2 work sessions ago. We did hear from a couple of board members with some suggestions. I would encourage you all that if you don't have somebody that's in your mind, let us know, because there may be somebody else available from another board member. Also, Mr. Chair, Dr. Allen and his team, with help from both Dr. Royer and Dr. Webb, really put together this draft. The proverbial "don't reinvent the wheel" was part of what drove them. One of our sister school districts spent some time on this. Their timeline was actually 2 years to make a substantial change. This is a draft timeline that we want to get feedback from the committee. But again, to your point, it's broader than just what happens with us, because we've had so many discussions. Many of us have had discussions about some of that research that shows even students who arrive at us may have spent, on average, as much as 3 hours a day on devices before they even come to us at kindergarten. So what we work on ourselves is very important, but making sure that we serve our community as a whole has got to be a piece of that.
So one thing we will do in the email that goes out is give a deadline by which we'd like to have everyone submit the name of the person that you want to nominate, and just obviously make sure that that person wants to do it and agrees to do it before you submit the name, so that they can compile that list and get invitations out whenever the committee is going to meet. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Our draft projection, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Chair, is 8 at this point.
8.
Yeah, we've got some draft topics to cover that gamut. 8. Well, we've got it right now scheduled month to month, so effectively, yeah. Dr. Allen, is there any detail you want to add to that? I think these board members are trying to make sure they give a potential candidate some parameters about what kind of commitment they're making.
Yeah, and this document lays out, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. You have the document.
Yeah, it lays out the various proposed sessions and some bullet points under each one that would be covered in that session. And then it gives a general timeline, 8 to 12 month timeline. So it'll all be here for you to look at, and when you're talking to your person to frame it up right.
I'll make sure to email that to you as well.
I have a question. Is there going to be an opportunity for any community type forums where we can, because there's a lot of interest in this?
I expect that's a real possibility, that the committee may say, all right, we need community input on this, or we need to share something with the community. I do anticipate there will be some community meetings. We did see in the model in a similarly high-performing school district in another state that was a part of it as well. And it's input plus, if there's any changes, making sure the community grasp it and has, and knows what that implementation means. It's both.
What's the name of that school?
I'm sorry?
What's the name of that school?
That was Northwestern Arkansas, Dr. Allen? Bentonville.
Bentonville, yes.
I thought of it before he got it out. Bentonville, Arkansas, which is outside of Fayetteville. I'm going to be a little facetious. It's the Brentwood and Franklin of the University of Arkansas's town.
One of the things that Jason and I talked about on this was that giving the committee a little bit of the flexibility to decide what are maybe some of the tools it would want to use to gather this information. So to his point, the forum or a survey might be one of the outcomes that the committee says we want to do in order to get to a conclusion, or to get to some recommendations that ultimately would come back before the board. Anything that's going to be a major change or a policy change would come back from the committee to the board. So it wouldn't be making final decisions per se, just recommendations.
I regret not knowing this, but do we know what has happened with the legislation on cell phone usage in schools?
Okay. And that would be what?
Did it pass?
Wireless communication bill passed. There's some times in the legislation where and it is wireless communication, so it's more than just cell phones where they are not allowed. And then there are times where they are. I anticipate, at this point, I'm working with our instructional tech and our IT department. We will be bringing a policy consistent with the state law. It just passed, a couple weeks ago, but it has been signed by Governor Lee. So there will be a policy coming, possibly around the time the committee begins their work. Sorry, we have to have a policy per the legislation.
And to that point, our standard has been students don't have those devices out unless directed by a teacher, but the reality is enforcement has an opportunity to grow.
Okay, any questions or comments about that? Oh, yeah. So is it on this topic or something? Okay. So, anyway, thank you to everybody who's over the last several months has brought up this topic and has weighed in on this, because it all kind of led to this, this committee being formed. So thank you. All right, Eric.
Thanks. No, I just wanted to recognize, looks like we have a lot of our teachers here tonight, and wonderful to see you in all your beautiful different school shirts. And so glad that you're here. We appreciate you and hope that you'll always continue to participate and give us feedback. So thank you for being here tonight.
All right, that is my report. We can move on to unfinished business. Approval of the AP Psychology Textbook Adoption Committee recommendation. This is revisiting this from a previous meeting. Mr. McGolden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Based on feedback from the board, we do have a presentation for you. Ashley Flood, our secondary schools social studies specialist. That's a lot of alliteration for an amazing, I'm done. Ms. Flood, if you would. As she's walking up and preparing, and Tim is getting that, I want to thank you board members who spent some time, especially this past month, pulling the books and looking at those books. We very much appreciate your engagement in that. So, Ashley.
Thank you very much. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to share with you just a little bit of context about the AP Psychology course. And hopefully answer many of your questions. But if you think of any additional questions, feel free to ask those as we go, or wait until the end, either one. So the AP Psychology course is an elective course that we offer to give students an opportunity to earn a college credit in high school. For some of our AP courses, for example, AP US History, can be substituted for a graduation requirement, US History. But AP Psychology is not one of those courses, so it cannot be substituted in place of a graduation requirement, so it is just an elective. There is a course and exam description for all of our AP courses, and that's provided by the College Board. So essentially these are our standards, our objectives, and this is what our teachers follow. We commonly refer to it as a CED. So if I'm going to try to say course and exam description every time, but if I forget and say CED, that's what it means. And so this course and exam description was updated and published in fall of 2024. And so typically AP Psychology, it's a social studies course, and it's followed the social studies adoption cycle. But because of this update from the College Board, the teachers approached us and asked if we could go ahead and adopt a new edition that aligns to the changes in the AP Psychology course. And some of those changes were significant. Sometimes it's a small update, but this was a pretty significant change, and so I wanted to share a little bit about that. One of the significant changes was to the writing portion of the exam. So the writing portion of the exam before was more concept application, short answer, free response. The writing portion now, there are 2 essays the students have to write. One is an article analysis question, where they get a summary of a journal article, and they have to analyze it, form an argument around it. And then the second is an evidence-based question, where they have multiple sources, and they have to state a claim, and they have to support that claim with evidence that's provided. So it is significantly different, and I'm going to show you some examples of that in some future slides. So the writing portion changed, and so our teachers are really looking for a resource that is going to support writing instruction so that our kids can perform well on that portion of the AP exam. So that's really what they're looking for in the resource is practice writing that's going to adequately prepare our students. The second big change was this AP science practices. So you might remember I mentioned AP psychology has typically been a social studies course. And so now it is looking more and more like a science course. And so the skills here are listed for you on this table. This is from the College Board website. The percentages over here show you the weight that that skill has on the exam multiple choice. And then you'll notice skill 4, which is brand new to this course, argumentation, that is only assessed in the free response section. And both of those essay-style questions, it states in the CED that they are assessing skill 4, argumentation. So the writing portion of the exam is new, and it's assessing a skill in the course that is new. So that's something that our teachers are looking for as well, is a resource that can support instruction on these AP science skills. So these were the options that were part of our review process, part of the adoption process. And so the first 3, Cengage, McGraw-Hill, and Myers, they look like a traditional college textbook. The AMSCO Perfection Learning is a smaller book. It's more of a summary. It's like a companion, a study companion guide. So it gives summaries on topics, and it has practice questions, kind of like an AP exam prep book would, but it doesn't have the robust resources that a full textbook does. So the first 3 look like textbooks, and then this other one looks like a exam review companion guide to the course. So our teachers, keeping in mind the changes that are in that CED, they looked at all of those resources carefully, and these were the 2 that we determined are aligned to the updates. So those are the only 2 resources that have updated support for the writing component of the exam that has changed, and that mention the science practices, particularly argumentation, which is the brand new one. And so our teachers, I just wanted to share this with you because they don't start with the book with their planning. They start with that course exam description, the CED. So that is what they start with planning. And we can tell that a lot in the data because our AP psychology teachers are phenomenal. They do an amazing job, and our students perform very well in this AP course. I want to explain a little bit about what we're looking at here. I wanted to show you the report of how our students performed last year. And when I went looking for it, I couldn't find it because of the inclement weather day that was mentioned previously. So I pulled this is typically the report that we would get from our students. And so you'll see the global average score on the exam versus where it says your group, that's WCS. So significantly higher average score. And then the exam is scored on a scale of 1 to 5. 3 is considered passing, so sometimes we call this a pass rate. The percentage of scores that were 3 or higher, in Williamson County we had 80% in 2023, and then the global was 59%. So students performing really well. Still performing well last year, but they were not able to take the AP exam on the designated national day because of the inclement weather. So they had to make it up. I believe it was about 2 weeks later than expected, closer to graduation, and so that made it a little bit more challenging. But that gives you a little bit of data there on how our students perform. So going back to the course and exam description, it's a very lengthy PDF. It's on the College Board website. Anybody can access it. You're welcome to review it if you're interested. But this is the course at a glance. So it gives you an overview of the 5 units of study. Previously, it was 9. So the content was organized in a very different way. So the Cengage and McGraw-Hill book are still aligned to the old course and exam description, which are the 9 units of study. So the content has been reorganized into these 5. And so the Myers book reflects this change into those units of study. And then the other thing that our teachers are looking at when they look at the course at a glance is those science practices that you'll see in the far left side there. And so they're really looking at how they can incorporate those skills into the course. And so just to give you an idea of what this looks like, some things that stood out to our teachers in the Myers book were these AP science practice boxes that show ideas and ways to have students practice those skills. So these are just a couple examples where you'll notice where it says AP Science Practice. And then the other piece is that the Myers book has practice questions for every unit and an item bank. So there's a depth of practice questions with the Myers resource that the AMSCO companion sort of study guide version does not have. And so this question type is not found in the other options. And these questions, as you can imagine, would be very difficult for a teacher to create without a resource because these are scientific journal articles, but they've been summarized and consolidated and condensed for it to be a practice question. So that's the evidence-based question, and then this is the article analysis question, just to give you an idea of what that looks like. So then when our teachers were reviewing the Cengage and the McGraw-Hill book, the Cengage book did not have the practice writing prompts in the textbook. We went through the digital test bank, and there were a couple short answer prompts, but nothing that really mirrored even the old exam description, let alone the new exam description. They had this one example in the front of the book. And then the McGraw-Hill book, it does have practice free response in it, but these are all the old free response question format, which was focused on concept application. So that's what the students are being asked to do. And the new writing portion of the AP exam is focused on that argumentation skill. So that new AP science skill. And it's, as you saw a moment ago, it's a very different layout to the question and what the student is being asked to do. So that gives you an idea of the updates and really just the thoroughness of our teachers in going through these resources and trying to find the resource that is going to best prepare our students to continue to perform exceptionally well on that AP exam. We've also heard some concerns about a particular topic in the course, and so I'd like to go ahead and address that if that's okay. In the College Board's course and exam description, there is a topic on gender and sexual orientation in the development unit. And so that's the learning objective. It's a little small, hard to see, so I wanted to make sure everybody could read it. So anytime this topic comes up, we have a state law in Tennessee where parents have to be notified about this. And so I wanted to share with you the state law and share with you how we comply with the state law. So per state law, parents must be notified 30 days prior to commencing instruction on this topic, and parents must provide written permission for students to receive instruction. So this course is an elective course, and then once a student chooses to take the course, it is not an opt-out. The student must opt in order to receive instruction on this topic. So the parent must provide written permission. If the student does not consent, the student is excused from any assignment pertaining to that topic, and they are not penalized in any way for grading purposes or anything like that. And so we have a letter template that we provide our AP psychology teachers. They send that home, and they communicate with all the parents that this is in the course. They also, at the beginning of the course, provide a syllabus that mirrors the College Board's course and exam description to make parents aware of all the topics that are in the course. And then, they follow up to make sure that that everybody knows about the opt-in and the written permission. So that's the state law. For students that do opt in, you'll notice in the College Board's course and exam description that in addition to the learning objective, they also provide teachers with a suggested skill. So connecting back to those AP science practices that we mentioned a moment ago. And the suggested skill for this topic is asking students to evaluate the appropriate use of research design elements in non-experimental methodologies. So the instruction around this topic is centered on evaluating. It's centered on asking students to look at it critically, to look at the research method, the design, to analyze the data. And most of our teachers, well, all of our teachers report spending a class period or less on this topic. So this is, in terms of pacing out the whole course, it's a small component. And so that's the end of my presentation, but I'm happy to answer any of your questions if there's anything you'd like clarification on.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments? Mr. Beasley?
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I was wondering, so if the parents opt out for their children to use this curriculum, what's the alternative?
It depends on the teacher. So some teachers have provided students with an alternative assignment. Some teachers have simply excused students from the assignment. So there's no grade penalty for the student not opting in to receive instruction on the content.
So related to that, I do want to just do a double check. You said usually it's that particular topic is a class period or less.
Correct.
So from a timing perspective, those families who don't opt in, it's a short window for the students.
Thank you. And which one was your favorite again? Out of the four options, which one was your favorite?
The unanimous choice from all of our teachers and all of our high schools was the Myers, BFW Myers textbook.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? Don?
Question. Yeah, I appreciate this, and I'm glad we tabled it and had time to look, because I've kind of reevaluated things, and I do like the Myers because it does provide so much AP test prep for the kids. And when we met Superintendent Golden, it's a prohibited concept, so they have to give them the 30 days notice, which really gives the parents the options so there's no surprises. I did talk to my lawmakers, and there was some legislation that would have affected this a little bit, but it's been tabled to 2026. So it might be on the horizon, but there's, I think the legislation was no LGBTQ concepts taught in the classroom. So that's on the horizon, but it might, I don't know if it's gonna pass. But that's just out there. But it was moving through the legislation, the General Assembly, and then they tabled it till 2026. And next time we go through this process, there's things we learn when we go through this process, and it would have been helpful to know that Myers was already being used, because we call it the new textbook adoption. So I thought this was a new textbook, but I didn't realize that this is something they already use and love. And so sometimes I think, maybe it'll be helpful when we look at the proposed, curricula, show us what they're using now, and so that would help define some of the process.
Thank you for that. Yeah, this our teachers are currently using Myers 3rd edition. As Ms. Flood mentioned, there's been substantial changes. We did mention that, but one thing I've learned is that one thing we need to work on, especially for next time, is to mention and repeat. And maybe say things in a different way as well, because so much volume is getting sent to you all at once. There's some value in that. Another issue related to that, of course, is the schedule and the timetable. And I'm very curious in a year or two where the state will be with that as well.
Anything else? Thank you, Ms. Flood. Appreciate it. Okay, we can move on. Excuse me, move on to new business. The first item is a 25-26 budget status update. Ms. Farmer.
As Mr. Golden said, there hasn't been a whole lot of changes since we last talked. So what has happened, a couple of little items, sales tax was really good. So I'm like, okay, we may be able to increase, estimated about, let's see, I think about 300,000. Then we got the ADA rate. So as a reminder, ADA is average daily attendance. Because FSD is also in the county, we split funding between FSD and Williamson County Schools, and it's based on our average daily attendance. And so we did get that updated rate. So that means there's a shift in the funding that will be coming to us for property taxes. With that, we actually went down a 0.1% on the split, which is about a $500,000 decrease. So those two things kind of evened out. So that's why we're still right around $12 million. What's next? We met with Education and Budget Committee jointly, and basically that time you present the budget. We will then, next week on the 28th, meet with the Education Committee alone, and then on the 29th with the Budget Committee alone. And when I say alone, it's just not joint committees, but it will be the committees. And we get into further discussion. Each committee will then have to vote on the budget itself. That gives us the feedback of where those committees are and where they think that the county commission will be headed. We do not have any updates yet on the property tax reassessment. We haven't gotten that information yet. But that, again, the county's fully into the budgeting process as a whole at the moment. So May will be a huge month for us. When we come back to you in May, we'll have the feedback from each of these committees. We'll have those votes. And then if there are any adjustments that we need to make, and odds are there will be, just because of different things that we've mentioned that we don't know yet. Nothing drastic. Sometimes there's not, but expect that next month.
Rachel, if I may, Mr. Chair, a couple things. Number one, you mentioned Franklin Special. Just as a reminder, Franklin Special, they've rebranded as FSD. I'm going to say FSSD, but they just removed the school district in their on their storefront. Do you know off the top of your head what percentage of the total is represented by Franklin Special versus us?
We, for the current year, 23-24, that's the updated rate, and then we carry it over into next year. But 93.43% is Williamson County Schools, 6.57% is FSD. And last year it was 93.56. So 93.56 versus 93.43. So like I said, it's a 0.1 percentage change, but that's about $500,000.
Just wanted you all to get a visual of that. We have somewhere, depending on how it's counted with early childhood and pre-K, about 41,800, and Franklin Special is somewhere around 3,000.
A little over 3,000.
A little over 3,000 students. So also related to that is an FYI for you all. When we are funded for capital projects by the county for what they call rural projects, which are projects for our K-8 buildings, Franklin Special receives that percentage in capital funding in addition to us receiving what is needed for our project. So every time there's $1 million project, Franklin Special would get, call it $65,000, somewhere around there. So in those, when we've been building schools in past years, Franklin Special would receive a substantial amount. So that's part of the county's obligation. So they evaluate that every time they have rural funding. So that's part of what we have to do when we present to county government. We have to establish where it's going to be really for their purposes, for that purpose. Final thing I wanted to mention related to that, you mentioned, Rachel, the tax rate. We've talked about it before, but I think there's value in mentioning it again. The county is going through a reappraisal this year. And right now, you will hear reference to the value of a penny. Right now, the value of a penny, which is a penny on the tax rate, is about $1.8 million here in the county. We expect that the value of the penny will substantially grow based on the increase in property values, which will affect the number of pennies in the tax rate. So if you have any conversations with your county commissioners, you might hear reference to the value of a penny.
I believe the mayor's breakfast is going to talk about the imminent reappraisal process for Williamson County. If anybody wants to go hear the mayors talk about that, it'll be next week.
Thank you for that. If I'm not mistaken, it's Mayor Anderson, and I think City of Franklin is represented as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Anderson Moore and whoever the chief appraiser is for
Okay.
Williamson County.
All right.
They'll be at that breakfast at
Yeah,
the factory.
David Coleman?
No, Rolling Hills Church.
Oh, yeah, thank you for that. And Lydia, if you would give, oh, she stepped out. I'm going to jot down a reminder of that breakfast as well.
Anything else on that item? Okay, we can move on to item B. We've got several budget items we're going to have to vote on Monday night. We'll walk through these one by one. The first one being the approval of the general fund amendment for Atmos donation. Ms. Farmer.
We did receive a donation from Atmos Energy of $4,000. It was to help offset background checks for literacy volunteer program. And so very appreciative to Atmos. Just as a reminder, last month, I believe we had another donation from them, so they've been a great community partner.
And I want to pitch and thank you, Carol, and your department. We have a community liaison who's been deeply involved in that, getting that effort to make sure that Atmos knows when those opportunities come, we would love to be the recipient. Dr. Royer, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Item 2, approval of general fund resolution for letter grade bonus, $4 million.
We discussed this last month because I did include this total in the adjusted fund balance and told you I would have to bring an actual resolution to you to put it into the budget. But this was additional funding that in special session that the state voted on for school systems districts that had more than 50% of their schools that achieved a letter grade A. They were to receive additional funding, and our allocation was $4 million. And so when you see the resolution, we're putting it straight into undesignated fund balance for us to be able to use next year towards our budget.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, related to that, that was the result of Senator Johnson, who spoke to you all at your meeting a few months ago, where he said he was going to try to find a way to mitigate or offset the impact of the cost differential factor. No, it's not cost differential factor. It's actually the fiscal capacity indicator. Sorry, there's a bunch of those. And try to offset that proverbial Robin Hood effect of funds leaving the county to fund other counties, and he did it. So I have made sure to publicly thank him, and I'm doing that again. The letter grade structure was originally designed to identify schools that have Fs. And those schools that have Fs actually have to have specific and detailed meetings with the State Board of Education where they present. So this kind of flips that on its head and allows for that. Now, I will say structurally, from a percentage standpoint, the A category is less than those other categories, the way the state structures it. So we did qualify this time, and I can't help but believe that was by design. But schools are competing with each other for those grades on an annual basis because every school has to fall within the category, and the category percentages don't change. So, depending on growth in a particular year or achievement in a particular year, they might move up and down that scale because somebody's got to get an F. Somebody's got to get a D. You see what I'm saying? Okay.
Can you remind us if that $4 million is already baked into the $12 million gap?
It is. I had already included. So the $12 million gap included using fund balance. And so we knew about it but had not done the resolution for it. So we presented to the commission. That $12 million gap did include, accounted for this already.
All right, thank you. Anything else on that? Item 3, approval of general fund resolution reclassification due to new account code.
This is another housekeeping item that I mentioned when we went through the budget process because we made changes in the PCR where the state wanted reclassification of anyone that was a coach not being in the teacher line but move them down to a separate line. And so we did it in the PCR, but we're doing this now. It's just, again, there's no budget impact on 24-25. It is just strictly a reclassification to put them in the proper accounts.
Any questions on that? Item 4, approval of central cafeteria fund resolution, excess fund balance.
Existing members will remember we've had this the last couple of years. For the new board members, cafeteria is different. It is a self-funded, its own fund. And requirement for them is they can keep no more than 3% operating expenses, total
3
operating.
months.
3 months of operating expenses in their fund balance. Anything above that is considered excess, and they need to spend it. And so what has happened over the last few years is, let's back up maybe 4 or 5 years through COVID, a lot of things were put on halt related to equipment within the cafeterias. And Mr. Rometty has been able to use these funds the last couple of years in order to be able to do some needed updates in cafeterias, and that's what he's asking for again, for use of these funds.
And Mr. Chair, if I'm not mistaken, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, our cafeteria has not raised prices in 8 years, is that right?
2018-19.
2018-19, and it's $3.75 for lunch, $2.20. Hold on, I just had it. That's my math. $3.75 for lunch, $2.75 for breakfast. K-12.
So we're going to keep those as stable as we can. We always worry every year, is the cost of food going to affect this? So in the last few years, we've been okay.
That's pretty significant when you think about over that same period of time, inflation's probably gone up in the aggregate 15%. Yeah. All right, item 5, approval of capital projects, intent to fund for asphalt, roof, and HVAC.
The next few items are actually ones that were on the 5-year capital plan. So as a reminder, that's something you all saw in November. It goes before the county commission as well as part of a request that they have in order for them to be able to go to bond market. And so we then normally will come back with an intent to fund. These are coming a month earlier, but the budget committee for the commission asked that we go ahead and bring these so they could see in total what our capital requests were going to be. So that's why you're seeing them now. But the first set, or the first resolution, is related specifically to asphalt roofs and HVAC. And the total for that was $12,153,000.
I want to mention this. We have this discussion with the county commission, budget committee, and the full commission pretty much every year. We have about 50 facilities, and something's got to be replaced every year because of the volume. And so it's always a very deep, detailed discussion with the county commission, because rightly so, they're being careful about their expenditures. But as Rachel mentioned, the budget committee said, can you bring all this to us so that we have a full grasp of what we're looking at for this coming year?
Any questions on that? If you want, Rachel, since they're all capital projects, just the next 3, you can just go through them.
Okay, great. The next is related to security technology needs, also in the 5-year capital plan. And the total for this was $13,815,425. This includes anything from the door fob system, intercom system, alerts, cameras, and the infrastructure associated with all those items.
I have one quick question.
Okay.
So is that across the district, or do you have certain schools that you are, doing this over time?
It is across the system. There are some things that are going to be, every school will be affected by something, but not necessarily the same thing. We did this in phases, and so some schools may have already received part of the items related to intercoms, and then it would be another set of schools.
Yeah, it's a 3-year plan. And so this year was phase 1. We're doing 15 schools. Pending approval of this, we'll do 15 more this next year, and then phase 3 we'll ask for next year, and that will finish the door fob intercom project. And we can get the schools to you if you need, if you'd like that information. We can.
And I feel like it's important at least to mention this. One of our primary safety goals, led by Mike Fletcher, we actually get some help from the state now, is the priority of access control. And so when Brian mentions to you door fobs, that's the key. That's been a very intentional project
Yes,
to
sir.
improve security.
And we started with the outdoor, which was the most critical, and that is complete. All our campuses outdoors have the new access control. That has been completed, so now we're moving internal. Yes, sir.
And I will tell you, I don't anticipate our capital spending on safety will ever end. I think it's going to be a constant. We're going to be constantly working to improve. As challenges come, we're going to constantly be adjusting to it.
The next item is a K-8 renovation at Hillsborough. The total amount that will eventually be requested is $6.6 million. With any of our capital projects like this, we break it down over the number of years we feel like it's going to take in order to complete the project. So the first draw on this would only be $3 million requested in this year, but anticipated total cost is $6.6 million. And then the last is a similar type renovation to Grassland Middle. In this case, the work's a little different in how they're going to time it out. And so the total cost is $7 million, but the draw for the first year is $1 million.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Brian, Rachel, are these amounts? I didn't look back at the 5-year capital plan that we looked at, but are these the same amounts and y'all? So,
Yes, sir.
They are.
All right,
Yes,
sounds
sir.
good. I just want to make sure.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Any further questions on the budget items? All right, move on to item C, board policies for first reading, and we'll take up these two, and then we'll take up the one that we moved out of consent. So, item 1, 4.202, child find and special education, and Dana, well, I'll kick it to you for this, and Jay, if you want to weigh in from a policy committee perspective, feel free.
Sure, I was going to wait till it got up there. It may be a little easier for me to explain.
It's the other one.
The other one, yes. So you'll see this has gone through the policy committee. You will see on the first page and on the second page, you'll see items in blue. The items in blue are either restatements of the law or and the child fine is an explanation of the law, of federal law. This 6 through 18 is legislation that recently passed and was signed by Governor Lee this week. So the policy committee recommends approval for first reading of that language. If you keep going down, there you go. There is in green some language that has been proposed. There was a lengthy discussion during the policy meeting. This language is not struck through, as sometimes happens during the policy meetings. Instead, it's offered in a different font because there is still discussion ongoing at the policy committee, and it will continue after the first reading at the board and at the May policy meeting. So I wanted you to be able to see that while I explained it.
All right, any, Mr. Galbraith, anything to add from a policy committee perspective?
No, I think that's. I think that does it. I mean, most everybody was there, but I think I'm welcome to hear from Mr. Bostic. But I think the first two items were largely agreed upon. There was a good discussion about the service delivery logs, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll just let you. I'll let you talk about like the idea behind it, and I think we have a lot of people here to talk about. So I don't mind. Usually we would kind of leave that topic to mostly to unless there's new information or new discussion. But I'm happy to have a conversation about it now, just so we can Yeah, because a lot of people might not have heard the policy committee.
Yeah. So the idea here is just for our related services, and we kind of talked in the policy meeting about maybe removing the direct instruction, which I think we all kind of thought maybe that's probably a good way to move forward. But the idea behind this is that students that have their IEPs for certain services that they are mandated at in there, such as like speech language pathologists or occupational therapy, and other services like that, that there's just a log kept of the dates, times when they receive those services. Talked with a lot of parents and gotten a lot of feedback over the last year regarding this, and it's definitely something that they would like to see, and I agree just from my own personal kind of standpoint. It just is it's a measure of transparency and I think protection for the district as a whole, just that those parents know that those services that are mandated in the IEP are getting done and provided for them. And particularly for the school, I think is a modes of protection when a parent might argue that those services aren't being provided. You have a log that you can go back and say, no, they were, and here it is. And so that's kind of the idea behind it.
Sounds good. Does anybody have any comments?
I just wonder if I could ask Ms. Griego if, what do you see as the time commitment that this adding to the special education teacher's schedule? And if you could talk to what benefit do you see of this being to the students from your perspective and your special education teacher's perspectives?
Yeah, I think there is certainly an element of time that this would require for any service provider. It really is dependent upon what we're going to ask them to do. If they are marking attendance, of course, that is a lot less of a time commitment than if we're asking them to document start time, stop time, summary of what is provided, those types of items. So I don't know that I can give you a number as far as the amount of time in addition, but I have pretty serious concerns about it taking away from student services if we're asking them to do this for every student that they touch. Many of our related service providers like OTs and speech therapists, they have anywhere from 40 to 75 kids on their caseloads. Now, they don't see all of them every day, but they typically see most of them in a week or at least every 2 weeks. So I do think that would be a large portion of time depending on what we're asking them to document. And teachers, I mean, they are seeing kids all day, every class period, usually anywhere from 1 to 15 at a time usually. And that is every period of the day, all 7 hours except for their duty-free lunch and their planning period.
So pretty significant. What benefit do you see for the students from this?
I don't know that I see a benefit to students in keeping an attendance log, if you will.
Okay.
What I'm really concerned about for students is I want them to progress.
Right.
So I want our teachers teaching kids, and our related service providers for that matter. So I don't know that I see a benefit to the student in keeping a service log.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Dennis?
Yeah, I have a question. I received this Taylor's schedule. Was that from Dana or was that from Maria? Because it's really good.
Well, thank you. So it is I can't take any credit other than I meticulously went through and used only names in Taylor Swift songs because it is a schedule that we received from an SLP. It's an actual schedule, but because it had student names in it, I changed those. So you will see names, but this is the schedule for the week for one of our speech language pathologists for this school year.
And I also got an email from one of the special ed teachers who actually broke it down hour by hour, day by day. I don't know how they're doing it. There aren't that many hours in the day. So I would suggest everybody look at those numbers. And the last thing I would mention is, can AI help in any way? I just throw that out there. I don't do AI, but I know it's out there, so.
There'll be some data entry somewhere from somebody. This is my first thought, but we'll have a conversation about that.
You know, I talk to parents who do get frustrated sometimes with the IEPs, and I think I guess it probably mostly revolves around when their student isn't progressing, looking for this documentation. Well, are they getting what they have? And talking with Dana, at the end of the day, it doesn't. If they're not progressing, it actually doesn't matter if they were getting their services or not. Then we've got the IEP team is it's put upon them to actually do something different or do something in excess. And so I guess I'm just thinking about I think what I've heard from a time commitment, I don't want to add. I mean, I think I don't want to add a kind of busy worker to add to the teacher's plate. I think that's the goal we've tried to do for the last several years, is to take things off their plate, especially this is what I would consider compliance. Like, this is just a cost to compliance in terms of dollar, or in terms of time and dollars, right? I mean, it would ultimately require us to do less service, potentially, have more people to do the same job if we're adding 10% to everybody's plate. But I'm just thinking about, is there another way outside of a separate log that we're filling out? Is there just a bit of additional documentation that we can provide within the forms that we're already doing, or maybe a different way to write an IEP to get more data points? Because in the IEP you have data at your data points, but then in between there isn't evidence. There is, if you pull it, because Dana and Maria gave us all the different levels of detail that they have, the goldenrod, and like all the different schedules, the sign-in sheets that the providers that have multi-sites go through. But to your point, that's not really in the. So we're doing a lot of things, but those things aren't being really collected. They can be reviewed, and they are reviewed from time to time, but they're not really collected to be aggregated and shared at the IEP level. So, I mean, I'm open to the conversation, and I don't know that the logs per se are the way to go, but I mean, if there's some bang for our buck that we can get from just a little bit different way to document, then I'm open to that.
Well, I go back to this schedule. If teachers, if they actually have a schedule day by day, hour by hour of what they're doing, and I'm sure their schedules are kept somewhere, and if you ever had a question, you go back and pull that teacher's schedule for that student. That's why I was talking about AI. Just, it goes back and it would look at a particular case, bring it up and look at it, but you don't have to have a separate report if we're already doing a teacher's schedule on the services that they're delivering every day. That must exist, right?
Yeah. And Maria, could you speak to those two comments from the?
Yes, those schedules exist for all of our related service providers that will look just like that, or very similar to that. And then all of our special ed teachers, the whole school creates what we lovingly call a map of student services. Basically, it is a schedule that is usually color-coded by kid. In elementary school, it's down to the minute, usually in 5-minute increments. And so it's going to show every student's IEP services for the entire day for every student and every paraprofessional that works in that building. And so that is available in every building. Every kid's services would be documented on those.
I'm just having trouble seeing the benefit to the students on this, and that's sort of the end goal here. I mean, it almost, for me, it looks like this is written for the benefit of lawyers who want to go on a fishing expedition to nitpick the services that our special education teachers are providing. I mean, I get the larger concept behind it, but, you know, it's just minute by minute logs, responsibility for maintaining belongs to the staff member, you know, accurate, timely, you know, maintained for a minimum of 3 years. I mean, I'm not getting the 3 years point. If the goal is to sort of progress, if I got to go back and see, well, what did we do on such a day 3 years ago? I mean, thinking through this, this seems like a major time commitment. And, you know, it's not, that alone isn't the issue, but it's a major time commitment that's pulling away from the delivery of services for kids. And so, to Jay's point, which I think was a very valid one about, you know, student progression and getting better, if you're being pulled away from actually delivering services to kids and taking care of them because you've got to play the CYOA paperwork game here, that, you know, not only do I got to do it, but I got to make sure I log it and do it right or everything else, or this can kind of come back and bite me. It becomes less services delivered to our most needy kids. I have major concerns about this, that it's harmful to children.
James.
So I wonder, Dana and Maria, is before our next policy committee, and I know y'all probably do this anyway, maybe you already have, but talk to the special education teachers and get their feedback. Maybe not necessarily if they want to go back to doing logs, but is there anything that they find deficient in the documentation today, and what would they say to address because I think the concern is valid from parents. My kid's not progressing, and I at least want to see that you're doing everything that you say you're going to do, and I don't think the data is relatively available to do that. You can see the schedule, but you can't really see. There's no confirmation that happened every time. Like, I get that. I mean, I think the presumption is that it probably happens, and it probably happens more so. But you have to come from a place of trust to do that. And sometimes when the parents are at their wits' end with their kid not progressing, like that kind of goes out the window, and you need something concrete. So, just if they have any ideas as an alternative way to rather than the logs per se.
Sure. We're happy to do that before I'm looking at Maria as I commit us to do that. We're happy to do that before the policy meeting. I do want to piggyback off of one thing that you said, because you and I have talked about this numerous times as policy chair, and I do understand as a parent the frustration. I do want to remind us, though, that equally as frustrated are our staff. if there is a child not making progress. So this really should be a collaborative. And I know that, to your point with trust, sometimes it is broken, but for a lot of our parents, this is a collaborative process. I've sat in meetings where it is just as devastating to some of our staff if a student isn't making the progress that we want to see as it is to the parents. So I do encourage, and I hear what you're saying, I do encourage us to continue to remember that as we're talking through this policy. Because yes, a lot of times the process works very well. It's if it's not working, what do we need to do? So yeah, we'll brainstorm and get some feedback. And when you say special education teacher, just so I'm clear, do you mean the special education teacher in the classroom, or are you talking about SLPs, OTs, PTs?
I think all. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, just.
I just wanted to add, Superintendent Golden and I talked about this in our meeting last week. You know, maybe we can do this in phases, but having our service providers, you know, have the service delivery logs where, you know, because it looks like a long list, but again, I said this in the policy meeting, and you know, date of service, February 10th, start and end time, 1 to 2 o'clock, duration, 1 hour. And then, you know, worked on sorting shapes and colors, still needs work on blues and greens and triangles and circles. Location of service, classroom, and then the initials by the service provider. And that takes, you know, 20 seconds, 30 seconds to write while you're going down the hall to the next one. And to Jay's point, you know, because I've sat through these IEP meetings. I had 2 of my kids had IEPs, and when you're in the meeting and you're not seeing goals being met, then you could say, oh, well, we've done this and we've done this, and so now we need to change something. So there is kind of a history, you know, so you can see what has been done, so you see what's not working. So that kind of gives us a little more history there. So just I think it would be some growth, but again, you know, the special ed teachers who are like in the classroom, in the thick of it, maybe not, but maybe the service providers would be a good start. And again, teachers, when we're in learning how to become strong teachers, we're supposed to, at the end of the day, take notes, evaluate how, you know, what did I do that worked? What did I do that didn't work? What are ways I can grow in teaching this? And I'm certain our teachers are doing that. And so if we have just maybe some format for them to enter in their notes, that's helpful. And that would benefit the students.
Yeah, just to the point, yeah, I would agree, which I think is why, kind of how we talked through it at policy, why we did, I could see how it could be cumbersome for the teachers themselves, you know, the direct instruction, so totally fine to take that out. But I think for the SLPs, the OTs, the PTs, I don't agree with the cumbersome narrative that it's so much work. It just seems like the bad infomercial analogy, like, do you have problems pouring water? And it makes it look like it's this big thing, and it does take all but a few seconds to fill that out. And the IEPs mandate these services. They mandate them to the minute for these children. And it's a requirement, and I think it's just like I said, it's a level of transparency and it's a level of protection for the district as well. And you know, that's what I'll say right now.
I think though, Tony, the way I understand it is that it is mandated, but the goal is progress. And so if there's progress and we didn't actually do the minute by minute, then there's no remedy. Like you made the progress. So it's not an excuse to not do it, but that's the remedy. So then if there's not progress, then it doesn't matter if we did it or not. Like we have to show progress. And so like it's not that we're not incentivized like to the IEP teams and then ultimately our staff to schedule all the services. we have a schedule that shows that all the services are scheduled. So that's where I'm struggling, because
Yeah.
when I learned how it's reported and what our obligations are under IDA, then that's where I can see why we stopped doing the logs, because it was ultimately not beneficial for the delivery of service to have them, because it didn't support an argument either way, whether we were meeting the criteria or the progression or we weren't. The logs weren't helpful in I don't know what do they call if you challenge your
In a due process.
due process, thank you. That's
Or
what-
an administrative
right.
complaint, any
Right.
of the remedies that parents have.
So that's where I am kind of sitting. But that being said, it doesn't mean that we can't find ways to improve our documentation to give some of the information. But
Yeah, I agree, progress, totally, absolutely. But it just that if it's mandated in the IEP, the services for specific amounts of time, then it should not be hard to document when those things are provided. If it's the only time it would be an issue is if it's not being provided, you know. That would be when the issue would come up. And if that's happening, then we have a bigger issue, you know. But documenting the things that we're doing to put parents at ease, for transparency, for protection for the school district, I just think it's a small step to ensure those things happening, you know. And I'm open to, you know, maybe ideas for that, but I just think a log of that is, you know, that's typical in a lot of other environments and fields in this nation, and I think it is appropriate here.
And I do want to say one last thing, just so that we're all clear. The service logs do not provide protection for Williamson County schools. That is the reason that Williamson County schools would use a service delivery log would be to discipline a teacher. We can do that with the instruments and the documentation, the checks and balances that Maria and I have discussed with y'all. What we look at, if we go to have an administrative complaint, have a due process, have a mediation, what we are looking at is progress. There has been numerous cases where it was clear, not us, not Williamson County Schools, but other schools who did not provide 10s, 20, 60 hours, but the child made progress. There was no remedy given by the court. So I do want to kind of make that point clear. I don't know that we've talked about that and gotten into those litigation weeds, but I don't want y'all to think it really is a protection for WCS. It would not be anything that our litigation attorneys would use to protect WCS.
Are you saying so that if a parent were to submit a complaint in an official capacity, that services are not being provided to the student, that a log of those services would not be of any benefit to the district?
That is what I'm saying. And actually, it's not what I'm saying, it's what the courts are saying. Because there are cases, recent cases, where the parent proved and the district admitted the child did not receive all of the minutes or services in the IEP. However, the child made progress on their goals, and the court determined there was no reason for compensatory services, which is the remedy entitled to the child, because the child made progress. So we've not talked about that, but I
Yeah.
did want to bring that up.
What if a child did not make progress?
That is a different scenario,
Yeah.
but we're still not going to be looking at service delivery logs. The court still is not going to be. The court is going to be looking at progress under the goals. So the child could not, I mean, to your point, the child may regress or not make progress towards the goal. The court's not going to be looking at, did the child receive all of the minutes of service? They're going to be looking at the goal and what progress. And this is why, one of the many reasons, as a district, we moved away from service logs and moved toward goal process monitoring. It allows our service providers to see, based on the data points, if a child is making progress. And it allows, if the child is not making progress, some corrections, some changes, all of the things under IDEA that we want to ensure so that the child makes progress towards their goals.
I'll have to do some research on that. We'll have to agree to disagree, I think.
Yeah, I'm happy to send the board the actual cases.
I can do the research. Thank you.
So I think where we are on this one is that Monday night, we'll vote on first reading, and I think the consensus is that we still need work on the part in green, but our choice will be to advance it to policy committee for second reading with that caveat. Is that fair? All right, number 2, 4.601, student and parent guardian rights to access tests.
You want me to take this one? Yeah, I'm sure. So this is, I brought this to the attention, and I didn't jump the gun. I just submitted it, and Dave and Lee didn't get it in time to make any edits. But we had a good discussion at the work session, or at the policy committee, and so I'm gonna think about this as it's definitely a first draft. We have a second draft that we haven't fully baked yet, and so we're just gonna speak to kind of where I am, and I'll let Dr. Webb talk through so you can hear it from her. But from my perspective, I'll just say the feedback that I got from the work session and from a few teachers was well received by me, and it's essentially where I took this and it was very prescriptive, and this is what you're going to do. It's not really how I meant it. I meant it to start the conversation, but I definitely received and said where I want to land, and I know where Dr. Webb wants to go, is more so let's create a framework of the things that we want to accomplish, and let's define the things that are definites that we have to have, and leave everything else to the school level, to the teacher level, maybe the grade level or the subject matter level at the school on how they want to accomplish this. So we definitely want to leave. I think I don't want anybody to get the wrong impression that I was trying to take away their, to force anything. But what I was trying to identify is what I felt like was a gap in where we need to be. First, in terms of students getting their tests back, as well as parents being able to come home with those and see they can use. So that'll be something ultimately that we want to accomplish. And then with the corrections, it's not necessarily test corrections has a specific connotation. It's really more so an opportunity for remediation, for mastery of the subject. And so I think I've taken Dr. Webb's feedback and just want to kind of open up to her so she can kind of say it in her words.
Thank you, Mr. Galbraith. We had a great conversation about this policy, and it helped to understand from Jay's perspective of what the policy specifically, what the problem that it's addressing, and kind of our summary of the two things really that the intention of this policy is to address is, one, parents need an access from home to help their students and ensure that they have what they need to support their learning of the standards for whatever particular class or course they're in from home. Like they need a little bit more access than what they currently have. And two, students need the opportunity to continue learning content so they can hopefully eventually master the content. That learning doesn't stop for a standard when I take the assessment and I don't master and I show that I don't know the content. The learning doesn't need to stop there. I need to know some essential content before I move on to the next course. So how can we get there? So from our perspective collectively with Jay and Dave and I, we agree that we can improve in that area. So we ultimately kind of agreed on a pretty significant rewrite to this, but we weren't prepared to bring you a full rewrite tonight or for the vote on Monday. But since this would have implications for the upcoming school year, we felt like we needed to get this resolved by May. So when teachers leave for the summer, they know what their expectations will be as they plan over the summer and prep for the upcoming school year, and parents can know what to expect in the upcoming school year as well. So our recommendation is to move forward with the bones of this policy, if you're willing, and knowing that it's going to be completely different when we come back to you in the policy committee, if that makes sense. What you'll see in the policy that we're working on currently are three big things. One is that you'll see language in the revised policy that indicates that prior to each test, teachers are taking the responsibility to ensure students are prepared for the assessment, and after the students in the course have all taken the assessment, the teachers will review the test or quiz with the students specifically. That's a practice, but it's something that needs to, from Mr. Galbraith's perspective, needs to be, ironed out in the policy. So that's a piece of it. And in instances where the test or quiz can't be released to go home due to test security, that will ensure that students and parents have specific feedback from the assessment to understand what was mastered and what wasn't mastered, so that they know specifically what did my student not learn in this content. And again, this is something that teachers are actively working on all the time. That's the first bucket. The second thing that you'll see when we bring the policy back is that teachers or teaching teams will have methods of reteaching and relearning for students who don't show mastery of the essential standards. This is something that our teacher curriculum teams that work together collaboratively, they're constantly working on this. In our professional learning communities, we call that question 3. What do you do when a student demonstrates that they didn't learn the content? Then what? You taught it, you really thought you were knocking it out of the park, you assessed the student and they didn't get it. Now what? That's a big question. And that answer to that question looks different for every student. So what you'll see in our revised policy when you see it at the next policy meeting is addressing that concept. And the third thing that you'll see is the motivation factor. So Mr. Galbraith in his original draft addressed the motivational factor with a numeric grade. There are pros and cons to that. So rather than being super prescriptive about what the strategy is, our recommendation is that the policy put the decision-making of what that motivational factor is in the hands of the teacher, and not be so prescriptive that we force them to one method when there may be something else that's working. Let them have their professional discretion to determine, how do I meet the student exactly where they are to get them to mastery of the standard? How do I motivate the students in my class, or this particular student or this particular group of students? But motivating students to be successful in the first attempt, and then motivating them if they have to reassess or even go to remediation. How do I motivate them to ensure that they give it their all that second try, and give it their all their first try, right? Because it can snowball on a student if they struggle in school and they're going to have to reassess and every class after every test, that mounts up. You know, we talk a lot about testing and not over-assessing, but if you take a student who struggles and you're pushing them to reassess after every test, they can get overwhelming. So it's a balance of motivation and using the appropriate teaching strategies to get the students where they need to be. And that's where we really want to take this policy. And those are pieces that we're continually to work on as teaching teams, as administrative teams, and putting that into policy doesn't intimidate us at all. It supports the work that's already in place.
I guess the question to consider is, do we, because it's going to be a complete rewrite essentially, do we want to have this be a first and final reading or single reading, as long as there's consensus from staff and the board in May, rather than voting on something that we know we're going to completely change?
I'll give you my initial thought. The discussion at the policy committee may answer that question.
Well, I think he's saying we
Oh.
pull it from this.
Not even vote on it now.
Don't vote
because
on
we're
it
gonna change
Monday.
it
Okay.
So
But with the
substantially.
plan on having a first and final on, we'll still have 2 more readings
Yeah.
at the policy, and that's fine with me, because we were
Okay.
debating that same thing, like,
Yeah.
we don't really want to vote on this, but
Yeah.
I want to progress it to a May vote, so that would work for me.
I think that's a reasonable solution. The executive committee can remove it from the board agenda, but then we'll treat it as a first and final. So at the May policy agenda.
I mean, I guess to your point, we might decide that we're not ready for first and final in May after policy, which we
Yeah.
could certainly do. We might say that it needs 2 more readings, but if it doesn't, then we can certainly do
Yeah,
that.
from a procedural perspective on the policy that calls for second reading, since we've discussed it here, if we're fine with it, then, Mr. Chair, yeah, I think that makes sense. It'll actually save us one logistical step at the voting meeting.
And I was just
Yes.
thinking about what Lee had said about really trying to resolve this by May, ideally, because of the next school year. Okay, if everybody's good with that, we'll pull it then from this agenda and vote on it one time. All right, so now let's go to the 4.403, which we pulled off consent. And it's a policy for second reading, and Ms. Clements had made that request.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if y'all have been checking your emails, but and I brought this up in policy meeting, but on page 2, after the definitions, there's a brief paragraph. I'm not going to read it for you guys. Y'all can see it. But I feel like this is an unnecessary paragraph, because we already do this if the law changes, or if an action of court or of removes something, then we take it off. I mean, we've already talked about doing that tonight in several policies. And I also looked at multiple districts in our area. I can't find a district that has a paragraph like this. And, you know, this policy is 5 pages long, and when you include all the attachments, you're going on 8 or 9 pages. And I just think this is unnecessary. And so my first choice would let's just remove this paragraph. But if that's not an option, I also sent a different paragraph that was similar, but I think we need to be more inclusive in that paragraph and say that, you know, in broader language, so that if there are changes that, you know, make it, you know, more restrictive, that we will follow those. And I don't know if y'all checked your emails, but I sent an optional paragraph. So, and again, if this is the will of the board to leave it, then that's fine, but I think it's an unnecessary paragraph.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, we discussed this at the policy meeting, and my promise to y'all was that I would get with Lisa Carson and see if she agreed with removing the language. There are attorney-client emails from Ms. Carson prior to tonight's meeting with her recommendation to leave the language as written in the policy, and that would be our recommendation, not to make any changes to the policy as it is. Of course, that's ultimately y'all's decision, but if you haven't read your emails, I wanted you to know that information is in there.
Any further comments or discussion on this?
I guess, is there an opportunity, will we have an opportunity Monday to discuss with an attorney-client meeting to talk about that? I just want to see if that's appropriate, just because it will be the final.
It's a good question. Will questions to Ms. Carson Monday night, if she's there, be ones that can be asked in a public meeting?
And Mr. Chair, that may be a Mr. Cook question. I know that he practices with Ms. Carson.
The problem with what you're asking is that
Can you,
the issue that rises with what you're asking is, what the hell were you asking?
whether if an amendment were made at the board meeting Monday night to take out that section, as Ms. Clements is outlining, and we wanted to get the counsel and advice of Ms. Carson on
Correct. So
whether
what
to,
you're
whether to do that or not, could she answer those questions in a public meeting?
She could answer those questions in a public meeting. Now, the issue is going to be, I think what you were alluding to originally was a closed session where you would be able to discuss and ask your attorney questions. The issue with that is that it has to be a filed suit or one that's contemplated. We don't have a contemplated suit here. So that's the issue about the prohibition about going into a closed session with your attorneys. You have to have you have to have a suit or one that is likely contemplated.
Well,
For that reason, I don't think that would reach, the current situation would reach to that level, because we don't have anybody saying they're gonna sue us right now on this.
I guess, so the fact that we've had litigation that we are coming off of is not enough?
No, sir. That matter has already been settled with the courts, so.
Okay, that's fine.
Mr. Cook or Dana, could either of you speak to what Lisa said in her emails?
I can't hear people. I guess I'll take that one. Lisa had some concerns about it, the language on it, and you all have seen the emails, I think. And her concerns regard removing this language and removing the effect this language has, okay? Now, there is case law that supports her opinion, and we have a case that is a recent case that has come out that is directly on point with this, that said that if you are going to have a policy that is going to be, watch what I say here, challenged, and the challenge is successful, meaning that the policy is found to be unconstitutional, or if the state decides to change the law, the language that we have recommended, or the current language, is that language goes away automatically. Now, the courts have said that if it takes discretion of the board to remove that language, then you open yourself up to liability when it comes to attorney fees and court cost, okay? The language that is being proposed gives you discretion, because it does not remove that language automatically, okay? So if our opinion, if you include the language that Ms. Clement is recommending, we believe it opens us up for liability. And there is a case that is directly on point. That is a recent case from the Middle District of Tennessee.
So Bobby, let me ask you a question and see if I heard you correctly, but, or maybe ask it in a different way. If we get sued and we have this language in place, and ultimately the law or our policy is found to be unconstitutional because of the language that is directly because of state law, then the state, it's likely that the state would be liable for that and not us, because they're going to sue both of us, right?
Correct. Correct.
And then if ultimately if it were, or if the state changes their law somebody else challenges the state law and it's struck down, then, hey, we're taking our hands off, like, we didn't create this, we're just following it. And so if it gets struck down, then our discretion would be, after it gets struck down, this removes the language completely. Now, we would then have the ability to go in and make whatever changes we wanted to after the new law was created, but then.
Absolutely.
So you're saying if it gives us if there was language in here that's not this, that says we may, or we.
Or you amend.
Right, or we have to, or, you know, we may amend, then that's what leaves it open.
That's the discretion issue that we have a problem with, so.
Any further question or comment? So, as it stands, the policy will be will be pulled off consent for Monday night. Will be a single, separate voting item, as currently written, unless there is any amendment brought up and is voted on.
And Mr. Chair, just from a procedural perspective, I was catching my assistant's eye. Lydia will include that as second reading, as a separate item. Under new business. It will be, yeah, that's right.
Okay, let's move on to item D, approval of the 2024-25 teacher bonus from the state. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You all know that part of the state discussion during this legislative session was to include a $2,000 bonus for teachers. That legislation included a requirement that the board pass a resolution saying that we will accept that money for that purpose. So this is that draft proposal. For us to receive those funds for teachers, you have to pass this resolution by June. We decided it's appropriate to get that knocked out. One of the reasons that we did is because the State Department of Education had told us they were going to give us a projection of how to expect it and some details related to it before the April meeting. They didn't actually say before your April meeting, but they gave us a date. They actually gave us that information yesterday, or maybe even today, this morning. It doesn't answer all the questions, but I want to give you a brief idea of this. The idea is that in the next fiscal year, the state will fund a $2,000 bonus for those teachers who worked for us in this fiscal year for more than 120 days as full-time teachers serving students for more than half of the time of their work. So you can see why it's starting to get a bit convoluted. So we don't really know 100% who's going to get it or how that's going to be structured, but what we do know is it's going to be based on this year's teachers out of next fiscal year. So I'm saying this publicly because I want to make sure folks know the moment you pass this, we don't have the money for this. We're going to get it. We're going to get it in the next fiscal year, and we'll go through that process. And it will include some of our retirees who chose to retire. But I do expect to recommend approval because the money's available.
And just to underscore, none of that process can be initiated until we pass this resolution.
Well, that's correct. We won't receive the money unless you pass this resolution.
Right.
We're actually going to have to enter a lot of data to the state and have them review it over these next few months.
Right. Any questions on that? All right, final item for tonight, item E, tenure recommendation of the superintendent to the school board. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Annually, we make tenure recommendations for you all as board members. In part because many of you are in your first full year of being on the board. I want to make sure you are aware that we do this annually. Years ago, some of you may have known tenure as if you work here for 3 years and you're hired for the 4th year, you're automatically tenured. For now, I'm estimating 10 plus years. The state has actually included an evaluation structure related to that. Teachers actually have to have particular scores on their evaluations for that. This list of teachers includes those teachers who have for the past 5 years met all the requirements of the state for tenure. And so certainly open to any questions you may have, but I do expect to recommend these fine teachers for tenure at the Monday board meeting.
Beasley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Will these teachers be at the board meeting on Monday?
We actually don't intend for them to be there, but they are certainly welcome. But that's not a, now that you mention it, I mean, obviously it's a lot in our district, but that may be something we talk about. We do make sure we acknowledge them, and we actually give 5-year service awards to our teachers, which is a parallel for that as well. But thank you for that suggestion.
Any questions on that? Okay. Well, that gets us to the end of the agenda. Thanks for the great discussion. We are adjourned.